And welcome everybody who's joining us this evening. I know some of you were here last week for part one, but even if you weren't, I hope you enjoy this. I was looking at the attendee list and I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Bonnie Gieshin, who was my resident when I was an intern in the MICU at UC Davis. Super smart, super kind. And Ted Hearn, one of my favorite oncologists on the planet, now retired. And Paul Reynolds, who's one of my favorite wellness leaders in the Permanente Medical Group. So welcome everybody. It's great to be with you. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen and we're gonna pick this and we're gonna put it in presentation mode, and here we go. All right, so this is a story of joy and meaning in medicine. I like stories because stories string a bunch of facts together in a way that hopefully is impactful and meaningful and memorable for you. This morning I was reading this book, Words of Gratitude, by Bob Evans and Joanna Hill, and there's a lovely introduction by brother David Steindl-Rast, and I'm gonna read this to you. And it's especially important in the middle of a pandemic with wildfires and political unrest, because I know that many of us tuning in today are just feeling stuck and uneasy. So Brother David says this: gratefulness is not a state in which suffering and adversity are selectively ignored. Rather, gratefulness makes us focus on the opportunity that adversity offers, the opportunity of authentic spiritual growth, and this turns suffering into growing pains. A bitter winter brings a sweet summer. If we dare to taste even the bitterness as a gift, it will bring about sweetness. We will find that not a single season is without fruit, and everything is good in its season. So chapter one of this presentation was called A New Direction. And we talked about how the triple aim of medicine had some unintended consequences, including disengagement and burnout among physicians, and how groups like the Institute for Healthcare Improvement came up with some model solutions for how we could work our way out of our burnout. And at the core of those solutions were healers who were happy and well and engaged. And the important thing was to ask those people doing the work what was important to them and what were the pebbles in their shoes. And that is the sort of leadership that is going to lead us out of the challenges of today. In chapter two, we talked, it was called Chit Chat with a Little Man. And basically, I gave some suggestions for choices we can make in our lives that could help us have more joy and meaning in our work and personal lives. And chapter three is called Playtime with the Elephant. What I would like to explore with you today are some of the emotions that we entertain and some of the stories we tell ourselves that are big drivers of our engagement or disengagement. And I also want to talk a little bit about the type of leadership that I think can lead us to a better tomorrow. So everybody tuning in tonight can relate to this mentality which got you to where you are today. It is the armor up and be perfect mentality that you adopted the very moment you thought that you wanted to be a doctor. It's the pre-med mentality. Just get tough, don't complain, and be perfect, and your reward will be admission to medical school and a residency and the fabulous job that you have now. The problem is that if perfection or achieving perfection is the only thing that makes you feel good, you will have many challenges to your wellness in a 30-year career. So performance expectations and a physician culture of perfection at all costs put our self-esteem and wellness at great risk. I like to compare the expectations of physicians with that of the world's best athletes. And I'm giving an example here of Major League Baseball. So these are the batting averages of the American League batting champion from 1998 to 2018. And you'll see that the numbers range, they're all in the 300s. I think the highest one here is, what does it look like, 372. And in 2018, Mookie Betts, which is a great name for a baseball player, batted 346, which meant basically that once out of 3 times he would go to the plate, he would get a hit. Now compare that to the expectations of physicians. What if 1 out of 3 times we did a good job in the operating room and the patient lived? Well, we would lose our license immediately. So the standards for us are very, very high. The other thing is, despite our best efforts, oftentimes in the retrospectoscope, we may not look as good as we would like ourselves to look, or as society would like us to perform. These are some images of Captain Sully and the miraculous job he did of safely landing his passenger jet in the Hudson River after a bird strike. And he immediately, overnight, gained worldwide notoriety and praise for saving the lives of all the passengers and the crew on board. But of course, soon thereafter, there were those who said, oh, gee, you know, when we ran this simulation, it turns out that he could have turned around and gone back to LaGuardia Airport and avoided this dramatic landing in the Hudson River. And I think this happens a lot to physicians too. If you've ever been the subject of peer review or the Medical Board of California, it's a painful experience because you are being judged on a decision you made or something you did with your hands. But all, you know, from third-party observers in the comfort of their homes with the advantage of the retrospectoscope, they were not in the cockpit with you or in the operating room with you or in the clinical encounter when you had to make a split-second decision. So I think that's also a very challenging thing that physicians face all day, every day. This is the inverted pyramid of self-esteem and wellness that I see us having in medicine, and you'll see that the base is very unsteady. So this is a representative picture of all of us on the top doing our best to be healers in the world, and our self-image is based on things like our college and medical school and residency degrees, and those who earn special honors. You know, your home office is filled with all these trophies and awards. And then also your self-image and reputation is based on metrics such as peer review and member patient satisfaction scores, the degree to which you code at work for billing, your access and quality reports. But the work we do is it's all consuming and risky. So there's a picture of this person seeking human kindness. I mean, we're dealing with people with physical and emotional problems. And then there's a picture of this woman looking at the tornado in the distance. And this is how I see every patient's story. Like, a patient tells you a story, and there could be a little thing in there which is a harbinger of something very, very bad. And if you miss it, you're really in trouble. We also come from home lives which are not always perfect. Like if you happen to be married, you know, challenges happen, you have children, things go haywire. And many of us rely on extended family members, such as in-laws, to keep everything together for us. And then we also have our own lives. We need to seek care. We go for preventive appointments. Women get pap smears and things like that. And so basically, it's a very fragile model that we need to handle with care. And if some elements of this begin to fall apart, so for instance, you lose your board certification, or for instance, your member patient satisfaction scores are poor, or your marriage gets even worse, or say your pap smear comes back abnormal, or your favorite colleague in your medical office building leaves. These make our self-image and our self-esteem reduced, and we feel uneasy. Oh, and God forbid that your mother-in-law should get sick and no longer be able to care for your family. There was a young woman named Maddie who was a star student and athlete at the University of Pennsylvania. And this is a collage of some images of Maddie from social media, and they all look really, really good. And then all of a sudden, one day, seemingly out of the blue, at least based on her social media post, Maddie ended her own life. And I know that sometimes people say, well, yeah, that's an issue of adolescence, and college is a difficult time. But many of these challenges we carry through into our careers as physicians. Here are some examples of two people where you would have thought everything was going right in their life. On the left, Anthony Bourdain, who was by far my favorite television host. He hosted my favorite television show by far, where he would tour the world and sample the foods and talk to the people and learn about and teach us the culture of faraway lands. And then on the right is Kate Spade, who I didn't know a lot about, but apparently, she was the queen of a gigantic, fashion company, and people would pay a lot of money for her products and stuff. And these are two adults like us who, shockingly took their own lives. So I think the reality is that everybody hurts, including people who it looks like everything is going fine on the outside. And the tragedy is that all of these people believe that they're alone in their suffering, when in fact they are not. And the same is true for physicians. I think that we try and maintain, a perfect exterior so that our colleagues and patients and the medical board will think well of us. But inside, we're all facing many challenges, and we often keep them to ourselves because, once again, we are part of the armor up and be perfect mentality. So what I say is that at the root of our woes lies the lie that we are only worthy of belonging if we stayed armor up and perfect. That is not, those are not the standards for our worthiness. And if we maintain that attitude of only armoring up and being perfect makes us worthy, it leads us to saying fine when we're not. And I love this little graphic on the left. The question is, how are you? And the answer is fine, but the letters are made up of words like useless, broken, betrayed, I'm falling apart, rejected, lonely, defeated. There's a book by Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community. And he uses the metaphor of bowling, which it's an unusual little sport in which you have to wear rented shoes and you roll a ball down an alley to knock down pins. But the reason why bowling is a fun and meaningful game is because we do it in community. And that's also true about life. But unfortunately, in our society, for numerous reasons, many of us are living life alone as opposed in community. And this is leading to a lot of pathology. Many of you know Claire Pomeroy, who was the dean of the UC Davis School of Medicine. She's now president of the Lasker Foundation in New York, but she published an article in Scientific American about the epidemic of loneliness and the adverse effects that it's having on our, not only our emotional, but our physical health. So I think that we as physicians are at a fork in the road, okay? And at this fork in the road, we could go to the right and just do the same old, which I have abbreviated as SO, and be like Dory and just keep on swimming. And if we choose to do that, we will just end up continuing to bowl alone, and it'll be a lonely experience. And I think we'll make no dent at all in the epidemic of disengagement and burnout. Option B, which is, I think, a better option, is to go what Alan Jung, this internist pictured in the middle here, to go what he calls buck wild, and to be like a Bruce Lee, a big badass, and to tackle our burnout and disengagement and do something about it. I love Brene Brown. If you don't know Brene Brown, you should go onto YouTube and watch some of her videos. You will love her, and you will end up crying and need Kleenex. But Brene Brown says that the real badasses are the people who wade into discomfort and vulnerability and tell the truth about their stories instead of trying to sugarcoat it, which physicians are prone to do. Teddy Roosevelt talked about daring greatly. It's not that I don't want physicians to dare greatly. We should dare greatly. We do really important work, and we should continue to dare greatly, to do our best as healers and to collaborate with our colleagues and to make new discoveries and discover new ways of delivering care and to share those widely. It's not an issue of not daring greatly, but the important thing is to be honest and truthful about the experience. So Richard Rohr, in his book Falling Upward, offers a beautiful map for how we as physicians can transition from the first half of our lives where we armor up and be perfect to the second half of our lives. So in his book, he describes this first half of life, which is essential. And during this first half of life, it's important for us to distinguish ourselves as being different and superior for the purposes of securing employment, fooling somebody to marry you, and having access to the people and things that are important to you. It's not that you should never try to be like this and to be excellent. However, if you continue to follow that MO, and it's always just about being perfect, and pursuing excellence, you will inevitably end up very alone and burned out and confused. It leads to what he describes as an inevitable fall. And the imagery in his descriptions is beautiful. He describes you falling, and you feel like you're at the lowest depths, and then the floor falls out from you again. And he says it's when you're in that most vulnerable place that you discover, or begin to discover, the second half of your life, when you're all alone and desperate for survival, fully aware that many of those things that you relied on for meaning and purpose have forsaken you. This is when you discover the people and the values that hold you up, and see your commonality with all human beings, and begin to work in community for the benefit of all mankind. This is the beautiful second half of life. And Richard Rohr says, some people make the transition when they're 8 years old, others in their teens, others 40s, 50s, 90s, whatever. Some people never do it. But he said it's important to make the transition. So you might be wondering, oh, well, John, it's good and fine that you say that, but are there any real life examples of physicians who have gone public with their daring greatly journey and told the truth and have benefited from it? So the answer is yes. This is one of my colleagues from the emergency room in Kaiser, San Francisco, and this is her exact post. I actually wonder if I jinxed myself. A few weeks ago, I did a wellness hike with Beth and some pediatricians at Land's End. During our walk, we got to talking about happiness, and I said I was pretty content with my 43 years of life so far, that I love my job, my kids, my husband of 20 years, that I had finally made myself a priority and was doing things that brought me joy. And then last week, in an instant, everything changed. I've been forced to look at everything through a different lens. Quite honestly, I have always thought I would develop cancer one day, given my mother's history and the statistics. But I kind of thought I'd be in my 70s like my mom. But when mortality is suddenly staring at your face, you start to wonder, what have I done with my life thus far? Have I lived life to the fullest, and would I be happy if it were cut short? I started to think about my mom and my thoughts at her end. I remember thinking how we came into this world with nothing and leave with nothing, except what we've experienced and loved during that snippet between birth and death. And I promised myself I would honor her by trying to remember to cherish that time. I don't know what this week will bring. I don't know what's worse, not knowing and then still having hope, or actually knowing but then having to face a stark reality. So this colleague, she posted on many social media sites, but here's another post, and it's when Ingrid is with some friends, and she says, on the eve of my double mastectomy surgery tomorrow, so she had her biopsy, it was malignant, I'm a little scared and nervous. I'm going to try channeling my late mother, who was fearless in her battle with cancer. I'm so grateful for the friends who helped me say goodbye to my girls through song, first on Friday night with my Bye Bye Boobies karaoke party thrown by my work colleagues, and then another karaoke night entitled Thank You for the Memories, thrown by my close circle of third grade moms. And I've spoken with Ingrid about this many times, and basically when she discovered the mass and she got the results, she could have kept it all to herself and suffered in silence, but she chose to go public with it and just courageously, be vulnerable and disclose, and people rallied around her. And I spoke to many of her friends from San Francisco, and they said it was their honor. It was a privilege for them to rally around Ingrid and support her through a difficult time, just as they know she would do for them and stuff. So yeah, I guarantee you she would not have received, Bye Bye Boobies cupcakes if she had kept all this private. So once again, it's another Ingrid post. This is after her surgery, and she got home, and I think she posted this 2 days after she got home. I hope that we can be more open and willing to share our stories with each other, feel okay about showing our vulnerability, because we gain so much from supporting each other. I have been so lifted up. Last year at our shareholders day in the Permanente Medical Group, we had several guest speakers, including the former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who told a very emotional, personal story about his own struggles with his self-image and issues of self-worth and things. And he said this, and I listened to the tape many times, and I took it down word for word. He said, "We are all going to have moments of doubt. I have them. I'm sure you have them, where we wonder if we're actually enough, if we're the right person to do the job and get it done." And then he went on to say, and it's in those moments that we need to reaffirm each other. And if you look up reaffirm, it says that it is a transitive verb. And if you look up the meaning of transitive verbs are not just verbs that can take an object, they demand objects. Without an object to effect, the sentence that a transitive verb inhabits will not seem complete. So who are we to reaffirm, as physicians, as we do this great but challenging work? We need to reaffirm each other. So I think you're very fortunate if you have an understanding family. It's great if your patients send you thank you cards and you feel affirmed by them, but nobody understands your life and your challenges like a physician colleague doing the same thing, dealing with the same challenges. I like this quote: "You will be loved the day you are able to show your weakness without the other person using it to assert his strength." Maybe during medical school, maybe during residency, somebody else's victory is your defeat, but in a 30-year career, your colleagues' victories are your victories, and their challenges are your challenges. And the more you can see it like that and work together as a team, as opposed to trying to make it as an individual, the better you'll do. So I'd like to finish by talking about the types of leaders that we need to lead us to a better tomorrow in medicine. And what I'll say from the beginning is that we need servant leaders. We don't need top-down leaders during a time like this. And I want to go into some specifics of that. So what are leaders? Leaders are people who help the people they lead, imperfect people like all of us, move forward in a sea of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So the acronym for that is VUCA, and I think this term was a military term to start, but that's what leaders do if you think about it, right? You have to move forward, but you have to move forward in a world that even pre-pandemic and pre-wildfires is full of uncertainty, volatility, super complex, and very ambiguous. And that's why we need experienced, well-intentioned, thoughtful adults to do this work. Life is complicated, and the answers are complicated. Robert Greenleaf is the gentleman who really introduced and grew this new paradigm of servant leadership, in which we flip the organizational chart and we move away from the power-reliant leader. And you'll recognize these characteristics of the power-reliant leader. They command and they control, and everything's about them. And the people that they lead, they're just tools. And even the customers who are paying the bill, they're just challenges, people to mollify. But in the servant-led model, the servant leader, they inspire, they equip. They're all about the people doing the work and the customers. And the employees are your greatest resource, and your customers are valued allies. So this is the new model of leadership, which I think we need now. Teddy Roosevelt said, "People don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care." And that was in large part the basis for the fundamentals of the IHI model for how to improve joy and meaning in medicine. They said, at the core of that are happy, healthy workers. And how do you make workers happy and healthy? You ask them what's important to them. You ask them what's working for them and what's not. Once again, you ask them, what are the pebbles in your shoes that are preventing you from doing your best work? John Riccitiello was the CEO of EA Sports. For those of you who are unfamiliar, EA Sports, they're a software company that writes the code for some of the world's most popular sports games. And the workforce at EA Sports, it's a bunch of UC Davis, Cal, and Stanford graduates, age 22 to 28, maybe, software engineers and things, maybe some young business people. And John Riccitiello was, like went to Cal about my time, older guy, gray hair, trying to lead these young people. And he may have learned about top-down leadership when he was in business school, but I'll bet you if he tried that EA Sports with this new generation, he felt it was unsuccessful. So what he learned and what he preached was that people are motivated to pursue a vision they had a role in creating. And once again, this echoes, the fundamentals of the IHI recommendations. You have to ask the people doing the work what's important to them. Rich Isaacs is currently the CEO of the Permanente Medical Group, but for a long time, he was the physician-in-chief at Kaiser South Sacramento. And this is his quote about servant leadership. He said, servant leaders focus on the individuals they lead. They listen, engage, inspire, appreciate, promote psychological safety, unleash creativity and innovation, and most importantly, create joy in the workplace. When Rich was running for CEO of our group, I thought he was a great candidate, and I spoke out on his behalf to the board, but I wanted to do my homework beforehand. I knew him personally for over 20 years, but I had never worked directly for him. So I called my friends who reported to Rich at South Sacramento, and I said, I think Rich is a great leader, but tell me what your experience is as one of his chiefs or assistant physicians and chiefs. And they said, well, Rich is a great guy to work for. There's work to be done. He picks you to lead it. He gives you all the resources you need to do it. If you're successful, you get all the credit. If you're unsuccessful, he tries to help coach you. If it doesn't work, he says, well, this isn't personal, but I need somebody else. But, that's the way Rich leads. He empowers people to do their best work, and he looks for servant leaders. And when he was choosing new physician-in-chiefs at all of our medical centers, when there were open positions, he would send all the shareholders an email saying, I'm looking for servant leaders. Don't even bother applying if that's not how you want to lead. There's an excellent book by Sutton and Rao from the Stanford Graduate School of Business called Scaling Up Excellence. And I've summarized it in this one slide. So I've saved you $35 and several days of reading. So Sutton and Rao say that there are extremes of leadership styles, and they use a religious metaphor. So I apologize if this is offensive to anybody, but it's their metaphor. So they say, well, on the far left, there's the top-down type of leadership. It's one way. It's an air war. You have landmark achievements, but soon thereafter you get disregard and disengagement because you're not asking the people doing the work what's important to them. And then on the other extreme, there's a ground-up sort of approach similar to Buddhism, where there are many ways. It's a ground war. There's a lot of local autonomy. There's a lot of individual joy, but there's a lot of inconsistency too. So Sutton and Rao say that what you need to do as a leader is you need to define what your organization's non-negotiables are. So for our medical group, for example, it would be operational excellence, exceptional care experience, and joy and meaning. And then you establish guardrails around these non-negotiables, and then just let people do their work. And I think this is a leadership style that works for most leaders and for most followers, because it's all about engagement and respecting the people doing the work and letting them be part of the solution. A good friend of mine, Brad Crutchfield, pictured here, was the president of Biorad, and then was recruited to be the chief commercial officer for 10x Genomics. But I've been a poker buddy of Brad's for nearly 30 years. And I quietly observed his ascension from just entry-level employee at Biorad to become the president, and now being a chief commercial officer for an international genomics company. And I once asked Brad, I said, Brad, how is it that you've been so successful in your leadership career at Bio-Rad? And he said, well, he goes, I don't know. He goes, I just have this approach where I meet with groups of people and I only ask them two questions. I ask them what's working and what's not working. And my job is to find out what's working and to make that part of our overall strategy and to share that sort of bright spot with other divisions in the organization. And then people tell me what's not working and I remove those obstacles to their success. And so anyway, in the course of my clinical career, I had many patients who worked at Bio-Rad, you know, anything from, you know, servicing machines to PhDs doing groundbreaking research to MBA types. And I would always just sort of, you know, subtly ask, oh, by the way, do you know somebody named Brad Crutchfield at your work? And they would all say yes. And then I would just say, well, like, what do you think of him? And they all love Brad. And I said, why do you love Brad? And they would all reply, oh, well, you know, he meets with us a lot. And he's always asking us what's working, but he's really more interested in what's not working. And we tell him, and then he tries to fix those things for us so that we can do a better job. Anyway, so it works. This works. It works to actually engage the people doing the work and to find out what they're thinking. People love it when you ask for their opinions. Long story short, so Brad moved from Bio-Rad to 10x Genomics, and he worked really, really hard for a year or two, and then he took them public, and they're doing very, very well, and I think in large part due to Brad and his leadership style. So in summary, I would like to encourage you all to continue to dare greatly. You pretty much need to dare greatly as a physician. It's really important work, and it asks us to bring the very best of who we are to the fore. But what I would ask you to consider is to consider, if you haven't already done so, to consider a pivot shift where you move from armoring up and being perfect and only feeling good about perfection and never sharing any vulnerability, never asking for help. And I would ask you to seriously consider making an investment in mutual vulnerability. And you know, that takes a lot of courage. One of my heroes in medicine is Taylor Ryall, who is a Johns Hopkins triple trained hepatobiliary surgeon, also got a PhD, is now a professor at the University of Arizona, but I've spoken at her American College of Surgeons conferences, and a few years ago, she just came out and was very public in a compelling 1-hour presentation about her own challenges as an academic physician, and she disclosed the mental anguish she was facing and the effects it had on her ability to perform. And she called on fellow surgeons. I was at this conference. It's all the people from UC Davis and UCLA and Hopkins and Mass General. And these people were not used to hearing this type of discussion. But you know, she's starting to move the meter among surgeons, you know, like, hey, I'm one of you. I'm like you, I'm highly decorated. Like you, I look perfect from the outside, but now on the inside, this is what's actually happening. And this is how you shape the conversations and culture and operations in groups. Okay, it starts with conversations, and then people start to think in different ways. That starts to change the culture, and all of a sudden the simmer sauce of your organization is changing. And then thereafter, with continued effort, you start to make decisions that actually change the operations in a way that reflect an improved culture. And last but not least, I would just say, from wherever you stand, even if you don't have a formal leadership position, be a servant leader. Be a person who is very curious and honestly, sincerely interested in the people you work with, and not only what they believe, but why they believe it. And ask other people for their best ideas and their best practices for how they deal with the challenges they face, and be very generous with your best ideas. And because when you come out and you're honest and you're vulnerable, it creates an environment of psychological safety And you have to have psychological safety if you're going to make any real progress in this healthcare world that is in large part dominated by secrecy and shame and a lack of vulnerability. So I think these are some of the stepping stones to a better tomorrow. All right, I'm going to stop my share, and I am going to see if I'm going to check the chat thing and see if there are any questions here.
There's quite a few in the chat.
Okay, so so I'm going to go back up here. Okay. Okay. Thanks for remembering Anthony Bourdain. Yes. Okay. Bonnie, it's so great to hear from you. We need to get together for lunch. Bonnie, I don't know exactly what you're doing now, but you were a genius in 1986. And not only were you excellent, but you were kind. And I like to say that that's a distinguishing thing about UC Davis. It's a university that combines excellence and kindness, because a lot of academic medical centers are excellent, but not very kind. Paul, you're too kind. Okay, let's see. Suggestions for being that servant leader in the Zoom world of isolation. How does one be obviously supportive with being self-supportive without being self-promoting? Yeah, well, that's a good question, Paul. And I'm actually open to any suggestions that people have about that, right? So Zoom creates a whole new interpersonal dynamic, right? So in that world that we're living in, be it Teams meetings or Zoom meetings, how can you definitely present yourself as being supportive without making it look like you're just bringing attention to yourself? So yeah, and once again, I'll look to the chats for answers there. I think, my quick answer would be just be honest and say, hey, this is not about me. It's just about me helping to build what I think is a more healthy culture in medicine. The name of the book, again, is Words of Gratitude for Mind, Body, and Soul. It's by Robert Emmons and Joanna Hill. And this was given to me by my colleague, Yvonne Otani, who's a pediatrician at Kaiser South Sacramento. And it's just lovely. And brother David Steindl-Rast, who I've heard in person, he's just like love personified. He's love and wisdom personified. And Ruth Haskins. Okay, Ruth, this is a lovely comment you make, but Ruth Haskins is California's best example of a very prominent clinician and leader in organized medicine, going not just public in medical circles, but in the Sacramento Bee, as I recall, just talking about her own personal struggles, as a physician, right? And I guarantee you that when Ruth went public with that, it saved hundreds of physicians in California who were feeling so ashamed and guilty about how they felt. And so Ruth, you're a hero. You're like Taylor Ryall to me. You're like a super prominent, intelligent physician who everybody thinks of as perfect, saying, hey, I know this is how I look, but this is a really difficult career. I love it. It's really difficult. I'm going to keep doing it. But we need some help here. We need to help one another. And I think at some point it's even fair for physicians to say, not only do we need help from our colleagues, but we need some help from legislators and our patients to understand that we're just people trying to do our best. We're not perfect people. We know the standards are high. We're doing our best for you. But we need a little compassion too. So, okay. from Renelle, what suggestions do you have to break through defensive barriers some physicians have? I think that once again, some physicians, especially if they're more prominent physicians who have an audience, if they just go public with how they truly feel, once again, dare greatly, but tell the truth about it. I think that they then become role models for other physicians who are hesitant, and want to keep up those defensive barriers, right? When you see a clinician who you super admire, showing, say for instance, what if one of your highly respected colleagues said in your staff meeting tomorrow, hey, just want to let you know, I really enjoy working with you all guys, but it's really hard. I have found great benefit from seeing Sue Johnson in therapy, twice a month, right? That moves mountains when a respected colleague, goes public with their own vulnerability and shares a best practice for how they can adapt in a positive way through things like counseling. And once again, the reason why I say SSVMS is my favorite medical society in the country is because look at the live today expansive menu of programs they have. They're fully sponsored by the society through your dues and things, and are generous sponsors for free, individual counseling, coaching, group meetings. I mean, these are real ways in which your local medical society is trying to save your career and your life. And once again, I want to applaud the executive staff there. You guys are doing a fabulous job and stuff. Oh, how can one apply these concepts to medical staff peer review? So one of the most difficult challenges of my 31-year career was I had a P2 ruling against me like 2 years before I retired. I didn't even know what a P2 ruling was, but basically I did something on a phone visit, never even saw this patient, where they thought I performed poorly. And it was actually a topic I knew a lot about, and I appealed it and I lost the appeal. And it just took me to my knees for the longest time. So number one, I would say, to those who serve on peer review committees, I know you're doing your best. You have the patient's best interest in mind, and you're giving feedback in as gentle a way as possible. But please be aware, of course, that those receiving the feedback are very sensitive, like you are. And I know that the intention is really good. I think, though, that maybe peer review could be improved by just some friendly comments at the end of the feedback. Something like, I know this is very difficult news to hear. None of us likes to be criticized for whatever. We have this resource for you if whatever. I personally shared my negative feelings about the P2 ruling with my EAP counselor. I saw Marisa Pierce during my career, and she helped to talk me through it. But I tell you something else, I still stewed in my juices. And what really helped me was I was giving a noon conference in our Sacramento hospital. And before I spoke, I was eating lunch and sharing with a super highly respected colleague that, hey, he asked, how's it going? He says, well, kind of rough. I had this P2 ruling. And he just looked at me and he said, oh, he goes, I've had those before. It's not that big a deal. You'll be fine, And once he said that, it relieved me of 6 months of pain and sorrow, just knowing that this super prominent, excellent hero physician of mine had gone through the same. So once again, it's just creating that environment of, yeah, we should have peer review. You have to have peer review. But what if you combine peer review with a culture of psychological safety, where it's okay to talk about how bad it feels to get a negative feedback, or one step higher even, what about all of those who receive negative feedback from the Medical Board of California and you have to hire an attorney? I mean, we really need to be there as physician colleagues and as a medical society to support those of us who are going through major challenges like that. Like, your medical group is better, your society is better, your patients benefit if we can save these careers rather than having physicians succumb to the many challenges we face. People often ask me, well, what are you really trying to do in this physician, and nurse wellness consulting career? I say, well, I'm trying to save people from killing themselves, and I'm trying to help them have enjoyable, sustainable careers for 30 years plus. Because it just breaks my heart that because of how we think and the prevailing culture, many of us who should stay in the profession and enjoy it fully are not. So that's why we need to work on these things. That's why we need to call it out. That's why we need to bring to the fore the best science and the best people to support individuals and groups to once again stay alive, be well, enjoy their careers, enjoy their long careers, and still be there for their family and friends, still be important members of your family and your community. So I think working together, we can do it. Okay. Okay. I have another question in the Q&A, which is over in the, I'm going to click on that. What is the difference between a physician and a healer? That is an excellent question. I am open to your answer for that. Can you actually type your opinion about the difference between a physician and a healer? I would love to hear it because it's a great discussion. Okay. Oh, and these are answers. The question has been answered live. Well, I guess that I didn't really answer it. But I actually don't know the answer to that. I know physicians are supposed to be healers and teachers and everything. But I, you know, I mean, I know what a physician is. I think a healer is anybody who is intentionally attending to the physical and emotional needs of another human being. And so I think physicians fall under that, but so do many other people. All right, and with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Lindsay and Sam.